Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Amish Inquisition episode 299 on Sunday the 8th of October 2023. I'm Phil.
I'm Pam.
I'm Matt.
And we're very happy tonight to be joined by RN Vooght, Rich, otherwise known as RN Vooght. How are you doing, Rich?
Doing great. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
I've been looking forward to this. I was I'm reading your first book here, The Spirit in the Sky, if you can see that up on the screen. And it's the title image, the image on the front cover immediately struck me because we've got Orion there, or Osiris, or whatever other cultures have decided to name this constellation, plus the chemical compound of a certain entheogen, which is becoming more and more prominent all the time through the work of Graham Hancock and Rick Strassman that you mention a lot in the book and whatnot. So yeah, really looking forward to this, Rich. And we were just chatting before we started that I'd read some of your sort of biogs and stuff online, and you mentioned like very briefly and mysteriously about the European Space Agency's Ariadne mission or something, and I got the impression you may be working on that when something went wrong. What's all that about?
Yeah, it went drastically wrong, unfortunately. I was working for the UK government's Ariane 5 space program, basically on security detail for the construction of satellites, which were to be launched in the South American jungle. I was working on security detail for that about 10 years or so ago now. And I had quite a lot of shift patterns, back-to-back, boring evenings. It was a wonderful job, greatest job I've ever had. Absolutely loved it. But as you can imagine, when things sort of wind down over an evening, there's not much to do apart from shoot the breeze with your colleagues when you're just waiting for the technicians to come in and start manufacturing the spacecraft again. And I used to talk about a lot of my research to my work colleagues. And they used to say, dude, what are you doing here? Why don't you write this stuff down? You should write a book. This is mind-blowing stuff. Why haven't you written a book? But like I say, due to my shift patterns, I'd be working sort of 12, 15-hour shifts, 6 days a week. And there was no real sort of downtime to kind of put this stuff together. That is until I was messing around outside a launch pad and decided to bust out my best moonwalk, which went almost fatally wrong. Stumbled off the platform, broke my back in a number of places, and I was back in the UK within 48 hours and having surgery on my spine, which is where I found the downtime to pen my first novel. First book. My first book was originally a novel, which was semi-fictional, based on the Grand Pyramids being a proverbial, let's say, a power station, which has been championed in recent years by Christopher Dunn, and it's extremely eye-opening. But I just thought I'd make a fun adventure along those lines, which was fun to do. But to be fair, in the process of actually writing Devolution Cycle, I came across a documentary, which I'm sure you're familiar with, entitled The Spirit Molecule. Right. And my life was forever changed. I had absolutely no idea what this chemical compound was about, let alone what it looked like. And after seeing this particular documentary, it felt extremely familiar to me. Extremely familiar to me. I thought, man, I know nothing. I'm not a chemist, but the structure of this chemical compound, it just sort of slapped me in the face. And the reason it slapped me in the face was because I was extremely into, or very heavily into, ancient Egyptian mythology and other mythologies around the world. And
was that due to you sort of, because you're a big fan of Graham Hancock? Was that you sort of, was that your leading, what led you into the Egyptian mythology thing, or is that a long-standing interest?
Somewhat. To be fair, it was probably about 25 years ago. I actually picked up a book in a junk shop, which I used to champion at the time, and it's got a lot of good takeaways, which are still valid today. But a lot of it, I think, has run away with the ancient alien hypothesis, as it were. But it was originally the Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken, which actually kind of opened the doors to this particular rabbit hole that I found myself descending ever further into, as it were. And it was that led me on to Fingerprints of the Gods around 96 or 7, maybe even 1998. And that really kind of got the ball rolling for me. I was absolutely fascinated. My outlook of history had been completely warped after looking at what Hancock was discussing. And for all intents and purposes, I still believe that what he's talking about is extremely valid. Again, none of this would have ever been possible prior to unearthing places like Göbekli Tepe, which we can talk about later, which I actually talk about in my latest publication, because Göbekli Tepe, I don't know if you're aware, I can go into this later on, but that's actually got an even more ancient Armenian namesake, which is Portasar, which actually means the umbilical of Osiris. And hence this particular rabbit hole that I'm deep diving down with the mythology of Osiris and the molecular structure of DMT. It just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's absolutely mind blowing. But I actually published The Spirit in the Sky in 2017, which as you said, I was fortunate enough to be supported and recognized via Graham Hancock's Author of the Month website. And from there, I started to appear on a number of radio stations, podcasts like yourself, and just discussing what my particular was about. But if even publishing The Spirit in the Sky, if someone had actually said to me in 2017 that come sort of 5 or 6 years down the line, I'd be penning my 5th book, which was still wholly centered around this mythology and this chemical psychedelic anomaly that we find in our human brains, DMT, I would have probably laughed at you. You know, I had absolutely no idea what this molecule was about. I grew up in the 90s, and you can say I've got a proverbial T-shirt or two. Do you know what I mean with regards to recreational substances?
That's something I wanted to ask you, actually, because when I was reading your book, and bearing in mind that it was written 6 years ago now, you mentioned that DMT, at the time, it had been confirmed to have been found in the brains of mice, that mice produce this entheogen in their brain. And it was still a bit sort of blurry, a bit of a hypothesis whether the same was the case for humans. Are we any further in understanding that?
We know that it's in our brains. We know that it's found also in the lungs, the cerebral spinal fluid, and the brain stem with the blood-brain barrier. It's all kind of one sort of somatic cycle, if you know what I mean, forever being replenished. It's also found in the eyes as well, which is extremely telling when we get to the myth of Osiris and the etymology of Osiris being OS. It's got a plethora of meanings. One meaning God, one meaning open, and iris is kind of self-explanatory in regards to the human eye. But we also find out that iris is ancient Greek for rainbow. which is quite revealing as well when we talk about let's say the Great Pyramid, because the angles of the Great Pyramid as well, we find, excuse me, are fundamental to actually perceiving a rainbow at an angle of 42 degrees. And we find out that Osiris as well, throughout the mythology, was actually dismembered into 42 pieces. And yeah, if you wanted to be any more clearer about what this particular message might be saying, you actually find out that the etymology of Osiris translates directly as seat of perception.
Wow.
Which is kind of eye-opening in itself, let's say.
Yeah. And again, the sort of opening of the eye, a lot of this sort of mysticism is concerned with opening of the third eye, and this relates to the pineal gland, and there's been theories that that's where DMT is produced.
Absolutely. I think they're a little bit closer to understanding that maybe the pineal gland might be too small to produce this. We know that it produces serotonin during the day. We know melatonin. We also, there's a lot of subcontext with regards to etymology and these words as well. Like when you have what's called even when I was on the beach, when I'll go back to my story, after watching the spirit molecule, where had I seen this before? Where have I seen it before? I'm down on the beach. It's blown my mind. And literally the clouds parted. It was unreal. And it was literally an epiphany. You know, I literally had Orion in front of me. And I was like, damn, that's kind of close to the structure of DMT. And then my mind's racing with regards to the mythology of DMT. Then everything kind of fell into place. But epiphany itself actually derives from a moment of divine inspiration from within the midst of one's mind eye. And the scientific name for the pineal gland is actually epiphysis cerebri. So there's a lot kind of underlying that's kind of in front of us if you kind of know how to read between the lines, if you know what I mean.
I wonder why they picked that name. I mean, who decides these things? Who decides what to name something? You know, part of the brain. Who, you know, it must come from somewhere.
No, absolutely. It's crazy. But I think a lot of these, I mean, that stems from ancient Greek. But again, the majority of ancient Greek mythology, it's kind of not been bastardized. It's terrible. It's been stolen, I guess, from an even more ancient lineage, and that lineage being ancient Egypt. So there's a lot going on with regards to mythological deities throughout Greek mythology as well, which is rather specifically talking about human brain anatomy, which doesn't make a lot of sense at first. But again, once you kind of start reading into the etymology of what these things may or may not mean, I guess the proverbial picture starts to become a little bit clearer. You have Zeus, the Greek godhead. Zeus, for all intents and purposes, it's almost another incarnation of Jesus. I mean, if you kind of think about it as well, Zeus, Jesus, it will make a lot of sense. But Zeus was known for sporting what's known as Amun's horn. And if you're familiar with that, Zeus Amun. And that actually comes from the ancient Egyptian deity Amun-Ra. And Amun-Ra was a supposed goat or ram-headed deity that supported these horns on the side of his head. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you look at it and take it kind of face value, you know. Well, in my lifetime anyway, I haven't seen any sort of anthropomorphic demigods walking around with a ram's head. And again, you can either do what the religious doctrines are doing, running away with this stuff and saying, yeah, kind of that's how it is, or you can kind of look at the metaphorical and allegorical meaning and kind of read between the lines. Because we actually find that the brain schematics as well. By the brainstem, we've got Amun's horn. And Amun's horn is kind of another name for the hippocampus proper. And the hippocampus is actually shaped like the horns, like within just outside the limbic system. And it's quite mind-blowing when you actually sort of look at a side-by-side comparison. excuse me. But the hippocampus itself translates as seahorse. Why would hippocampus mean seahorse? You know, what's all that about? And we find that it's translated as seahorse for good reason, because we have the much famed and fabled myth of Pegasus. And Pegasus is the flying horse. Again, doesn't make a lot of sense. I've done a lot of horse riding in my time. Never seen one that could fly.
Mm.
But again, it's what does it mean? What does it mean? We find out that Pegasus was favored by the goddess of memory, Nemesis, and the 9 muses. And muses means to think, to ponder, to recall. When we're talking about the hippocampus, and the higher brain function of the hippocampus is to do with memory. Okay. So we find out through the mythology, through the godhead of Zeus, he was actually stabled in Zeus's stables, apparently in the sky. But again, I think that's allegorical of a higher conscious level of understanding. I've gone a little bit off the topic of Osiris, but I will continue for
It's all right. It's all right.
the purpose of this train of thought.
Yeah.
But we find the hippocampus is not only is it translated as seahorse, the hippocampus itself actually looks like a seahorse. That is why it's named hippocampus seahorse. If you bear with me, I'm just going to try and grab up an image, because I've got a few more on here which will help you understand this a little bit more, and I'll try and talk my way through it as well.
It's all right. You're going to try and share a picture?
Yeah, I will do. I will do. So what we understand from the myth of Pegasus, he was known to have kicked open the where are we? On Mount Helicon, he kicked open the sacred fountain of Hippocrene. And that doesn't, again, make a world of sense. Okay, here we go. Get this image up here.
No.
See this?
No. Try unsharing and sharing again, like we did
go.
before.
Okay,
I don't know why. It's just computers are terrible.
100%.
It just
True.
sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
There we go.
Sometimes they
Oh,
do.
there we go. Right, and this time it decides to work.
Okay.
Yeah, it's come up
So
there.
just at the bottom, we can see.
Wow,
you
the
see my cursor there?
seahorse.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, so there we go. That's the seahorse. And here is what the hippocampus looks like.
Wow.
And looking at the brain from behind, we have Armun's horn here.
Is that the bit in blue?
That's the bit in blue.
Right.
That's the bit in blue. That's the hippocampus. So
Got you.
if you can imagine this bit here wrapped around each side of the left and right brain lobe.
Right, got you.
I'm sure there's a far more scientific name than that. But what we find is that Pegasus kicked open the fountain of Hippocrene, which causes its waters to flow. Now, if you look at that as in, I guess, a more allegorical sense, it's opening the pathways for your memory to flow.
Right.
That makes a little bit more sense.
So I'm guessing if people who have damage to the hippocampus, it affects their memory then. Is that the...
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. But again, we find out that Pegasus was a flying horse, and it doesn't make a world of sense, does it, in kind of the modern era?
Mm.
But we find out that the hippocampus itself is actually described as a white eminence. And for all intents and purposes, Pegasus, the flying horse, was winged and white.
Yeah.
But where do his wings come from? Now, this is where we go back to ancient Greek etymology again. And a lot of these words were still using today. They've been used for more than 2,000 years. But we actually find a part of the human brain known as the cerebrum. So the cerebrum, its job is to protect and cover the brainstem and the hippocampus proper, if that makes any sense. And just here, I don't know if you can see, it's a very small image. I've got better images. but a top-down view of the cerebrum, it actually looks like angels' wings. And the angel is also known as a cherubim. So we have cerebrum and cherubim.
Wow.
And it's the cherubim's job to actually cover and protect the house of God or the brainstem.
Whoa, let's just think about the Ark of the Covenant, man. The cherubims on top of the seat of God, the mercy seat.
Yeah, just
absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's so cool.
I have another image here. Or do I? No, I don't. It's not there. We'll come out of that for now. We'll stop sharing and get my face back up. I do apologise for this.
It's all right.
I'm quite hard to navigate some of these things. So what I'm trying to get at here is basically, for all intents and purposes, all these things are these images and mythologies are allegorical and metaphoric in nature with regards to human potential, I guess, the human experience and the functionality of the human brain. And it makes more, in my eyes, again, I'm not out here to offend anyone with regards to religion, but unfortunately, in the 21st century, a lot of this kind of religious malarkey with the wars, it's just started to kick off over again, and you know where. It's all over a book of allegories. You know, I mean, the Bible is extremely explicit. It can't be any more impending when it actually says, literally, these are dark sayings of old. These are riddles of the wise. Jesus didn't say anything unless it was in a parable. Whether he spoke in terms of allegory, you know, it becomes extremely third eye opening and obvious once you know how to kind of dissect this particular religious iconography and indeed scripture in the 21st century. It makes a lot more sense with regards to 21st century science than it does to 21st century religion. Do
you follow Dave Matheson at all, Rich?
Yeah, I know Dave Matheson. Yeah, he does the constellations and the star charts,
I think you'd dig his sort of stuff because I think you're probably coming at this.
Read a couple of his books. A very, very learned man. Very clever guy. Very, very clever guy. And I have to admit, probably 98, 99% of everything that he's putting forward, I have to kind of tick off and say, yeah, take a bow. You've nailed that. Absolutely nailed it. Because again, you've got a lot of these Greek vases and what have you that are depicting really random scenes, which only makes sense if you kind of, I guess, unpack it and undress certain parts of the scene and emblazon that onto the sky. And the story that it's actually telling around the vase or whatever it may or may not be, it makes a lot more sense with regards to the cycle of the cosmos, the zodiac, and what we call precession. It's mind-blowing stuff. Yeah. So essentially, someone somewhere has worked all this out for us and kind of inserted it into myth and mortar, as it were, for, I guess, a scientifically savvy civilization society like our own, to actually, again, I keep saying it, but read between the lines and look at the deeper meaning, you know? Because if that's not the case, then I guess maybe there were dung beetle-headed dudes walking around ancient Egypt 5,000 years ago, telling you how it is or how it isn't.
Stargate.
Well, I was going to say there's probably two possible explanations for what we're finding, but I want to save that till later on. Let's not go to conclusions just yet. What about let's go back to Osiris and this
absolutely and this
again, link.
I don't profess to be any kind of certified biologist, chemist, archaeologist, whatever the is or isn't. I'd like to think, blowing my own trumpet, I'm just a rather extremely well-read an inquisitive and open-minded individual that's open to interpretation. And when the interpretation makes a lot more sense underneath a scientific lens as opposed to a religious lens or opinion, I think there's breadcrumbs to follow that could really give you something to digest at the end of at the end of the trail, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I was just going to see if I had an actual image. I don't know. Oh, maybe I can. Maybe if I'm really slick and fast.
Too late.
Because I think I downloaded a picture which represents sort of the hypothesis of this first book, and it shows in graphic detail this link between Osiris and the DMT molecule.
Okay. All right. If that's I'll tell you what. If you drop that image, I've got an image with the constellations and the chemical counterparts left and right, so you can actually.
Yeah, I've just thrown it up on screen for everyone now. The blue image there. So what is going on here, Rich? With the spirit in the sky.
What I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm actually going to screen share again. I've got that's an old image of mine again that was punted out sort of 6 years ago.
Right.
But as it stands, where are we? Here we are. Can you see this?
Oh yes, yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Right, I'm just going to give a little bit of a backstory to the myth of Osiris, if you don't mind, before we actually get to the constellation and the possibility of it being descriptive, a microscopic psychoactive chemical compound found throughout nature and inside the human brain. So,
yeah, go for it.
Right. Okay, so the myth of Osiris starts off at an elaborate banquet that's been actually set by Osiris's wicked brother, known as Set or Seth, depending on sort of where you get your sources from. But everyone is at this party. Everyone's having a great time. Set decides to play a game, and he brings out what can only be described as an ornate coffer, a huge wooden box which was fashioned out of the acacia tree, which is extremely significant, which is what we'll get to as well. Now, he actually invites guest after guest to actually try the dimensions of this beautiful wooden coffer, and actually suggests whoever it befits perfectly can in fact keep it.
A bit like Cinderella.
There you go.
Slipper.
Whoever this shoe fits, right? In fact, this particular mythology has been remembered via the Star Wars trilogy, believe it or not. Are you familiar with Star Wars, right?
The what?
Honestly, Rich, like just behind Ben is a life-size scale Han Solo in carbonite.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that is beautiful.
He is beautiful.
I'm not going to take me top. Got Anakin and all sorts tattooed up and down my left shoulder, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a brief synopsis of how this plays into the Star Wars franchise, and then I'll get back to the mythology. But what we actually find out that from Star Wars, I guess a long time ago, yet not so far away, Anakin Skywalker, Osiris, is somewhat disposed of by a self-appointed emperor described as a Sith Lord, who represents chaos or the dark side of the Force. Now, this self-appointed emperor betrays a corrupted Anakin who was tempted or tricked by the Sith, remember Seth, excuse me, but not before Anakin, Osiris, made certain of his legacy and impregnated his lover Padme, Isis.
Right, yeah.
Now, in time, Anakin's son, Luke Skywalker, who is Horus, the sky god, would learn of his father's fate and avenge his untimely death, thus restoring peace to the galaxy. But the original trilogy also reminds us of Isis and her search for her ill-fated lover Osiris, in so much that Osiris, we find, and I'll get to this in a minute, Osiris was entombed within a pillar of acacia inside the palace of the king of Byblos. Now, as you well know, with regards to what's hanging on the wall behind you,
Yeah.
The Empire Strikes Back retells the myth of Princess Leia somewhat dutifully rescuing Han Solo from the evil clutches of Jabba the Hutt. Solo, we learn, had been entombed, frozen in carbonite, and hung amongst the pillars of a grandiose palace. You see where we're going?
Yeah.
We've also got an ancient Egyptian god as well, known as Bes. It's a lesser known deity for all intents and purposes, but he was basically known as the defender of all that was good, yet held no regard for the dark side. And Bess is probably the original Celtic mythology, or the best contender for the Green Man, or what we call the Leprechaun.
Oh, little green men in Star Wars. Can't think of any.
Jawas. No.
Yoda.
Yoda.
Oh, Yoda.
Wow.
So anyway, how this relates to the story of Osiris is everybody is taking their turns to jump inside this beautiful casket. Yeah, everyone's coming up too short, too small, too tall. Until the time of Osiris. Osiris lays down inside this beautiful casket and it fits him perfectly. Now, to the guest's stunned amazement, what we find is that Set and his men decide to seize the opportunity and slam the lid completely tight, fasten it shut. They take Osiris entombed within this coffer and they throw it into the River Nile. He's set adrift on the River Nile for a number of weeks. Nobody really knows, but he eventually runs aground upon the coastal banks of Byblos in modern-day Lebanon. Excuse me. Where Osiris then becomes entombed, or I should say further entombed, within the trunk of a tamarisk tree. We find that the tamarisk is a variety of acacia. Now, after a number of years, the king of Byblos orders the felling of the tree, as it's going to be carved into a pillar that's going to adorn the walls of his palace. Hence the Han Solo story, right? Osiris's sister, Isis, learns of her lover's fate, bargains with the king, who sets him free. Unfortunately, this kind of rubs Seth up the wrong way. He thinks he's going to rule over the Nile Valley with darkness and chaos. But he learns of this, I guess, resurrection, and systematically decides to dismember Osiris, dispatching him once and for all. Where legend then dictates Osiris became the complete embodiment of the constellation of Orion.
Right.
Now, we've got two conflicting mythologies here, because Osiris, where he was entombed within the casket and the trunk of the tamarisk tree, known as the acacia, he was forever remembered as the complete embodiment or the lifeblood of the acacia.
Right.
He was also known, as I say, when he became resurrected by his wife Isis, he was then murdered for the second time and then became synonymous with the complete constellation of Orion. Now, ancient Egyptian gods pretty much are deified and remembered as single stars. And Isis I'll get to a little bit later on in the conversation, but she's specifically remembered as just one star, as Sirius, within the constellation of the big dog in the sky, Canis Major. But Osiris, we find, he's got this complete mythology surrounding the complete constellation of Orion, but he's also known as the lifeblood of the acacia. So it's kind of conflicting. He either resides here on Earth within the lifeblood, or air quotes, sap of the acacia, or he resides on a macroscopic scale as the constellation which we recognize today as Orion. So you can either take that at face value and say, like the Egyptologists still do today, yep, Osiris was murdered, rescued, murdered again, became a constellation and was remembered as the lifeblood of Osiris. We're not going to talk much more about that. Let's move along. Or there's some kind of deeper hidden meaning. And this is where I believe that what they're trying to say with regards to Osiris being entombed within the lifeblood or the sap of the acacia, I think what they're actually trying to say to us, that they've actually understood the molecular structure of DMT, or the lifeblood of the acacia, and they've decided to, for all intents and purposes, emblazon it upon the macrocosm for a scientifically savvy, I guess, society, like I've said earlier on, to kind of read between the lines and say there's a kind of as above so below thing going on here, or not. Now, what I have found prior to releasing The Spirit in the Sky, was that I had a number of, I guess, naysayers or doubters with regards to the original myth of Osiris. And I'll get to why I think this makes sense in a minute. I've got some more imagery, which I will bring up very, very quickly. I mentioned earlier on that Osiris, that DMT is also found in the human eye and quite possibly the pineal gland. Now, the third eye of the pineal gland is actually, again, for all intents and purposes, it's structured like a human eye. It's got the same rod and cone structure. It's connected to the optic thalamus. Everything about it says it's screaming, "I'm another eye. I'm an eye."
Right, I've heard some people say that it was an eye, like going back millions of years, that it was a working eye.
And that wouldn't surprise me because I can't remember the name of the lizard, but there's one that's actually kind of famed in Australia who's actually still got the third eye on the top of its head, and it's fully functional as well. It looks completely alien, to be fair, but I guess nature doesn't lie. So whether this is recessed into the cavity of the human brain over, I don't know, the course of evolution, who knows? I mean, I'm not savvy enough to work that out, but for whatever reason, it does appear somewhat dormant until we, I guess, ingest this otherworldly chemical compound past the blood-brain barrier in order for the third eye, I guess, to otherwise awaken. Now, on the screen, I don't know if you can see it, if it's come up yet, we've got a classic bust of Osiris.
Yeah, we've got that, yeah.
Yeah. So on the left-hand side, you've got what's described as the photoreceptor alignment, and they come in three colors: blue, green, and red. Green being the chief and I guess the number one cone within, within the eyes and the pineal gland. And again, it's my contention that this green-skinned deity is actually more descriptive of depicting the functionality of the photoreceptors and the cone alignment within the pineal gland and the human eye. As you can see on the right-hand side, we've got a breakdown of what these cones look like. And I'll probably butcher the pronunciation of the mitochondria, which is, again, for all intents and purposes, green in color. It's got a conical lamellae, which would again seem to correlate alongside this odd or ill-fitting headdress. And we also find that where the synapse is, around Osiris's neck collar, we've also got the alignment of red, green, and blue to almost kind of reinforce the hypothesis, as it were.
Right. Wow.
But if you actually look at the brainstem as well, I'm not sure I've actually got an image here ready that's loaded up. No, I do apologize. But again, everything, again, everything looks absolutely allegorical, opposed to taking this particular mythology at face value. And again,
you've extended the constellation of Orion downwards there, haven't you?
There we go. This is where the naysayers, I guess, and my doubters came in. And to be fair, even though it was somewhat championed by Graham Hancock and supported when he published my article on his website, I was over the moon. I was chuffed that this kind of had a bit of momentum and what have you. But like I say, there were naysayers that were saying, well, with all due respect, the molecular structure of DMT, its fundamental structure has what's known at the bottom part of the molecular structure as a hexagonal ring that's known as the benzene ring or the indol's benzene ring. Right. And for the mythology to make more sense, you would have to, instead of looking on the left here and seeing the full trapezium, to look on the right to make it pretty much a nailed down structure of as above, so below. You would have to expand the constellation of Orion, albeit Osiris, to the constellation below it. But to a certain extent, without actually reading into the mythology and just writing a book saying, oh, look, I've made it fit, I've popped it into the constellation below it, it fits. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, I can or can't explain it. But if we actually, again, go further into the myth of Osiris, it's rather explicit in telling us to actually join Osiris in the sky, the constellation of Orion, with the constellation that's below it. And how this works is the constellation below it, we know today as Lepus, which is known as the hare or the rabbit in the sky. Right. But the ancient Egyptians, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water.
That's right. Follow the white rabbit.
Egyptians knew this particular mythology or this constellation as Wenet or Unefa. Now, Wenet, we find, is, and I have an image here. Here we go. Wenet, just at the bottom, is a rabbit or a hare-headed deity that's synonymous with Osiris. So we now have Osiris as a hare-headed god. Without reading into the mythology like we're doing on this particular conversation, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But what we find out through the myth of Osiris is what's known as or described as the mysteries of Abydos. Now, in the mysteries of Abydos, we find that Osiris set sail, on the what's known as the Neshmet or the cosmic barge. You can see that. You see my cursor?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's your Neshmet or the cosmic barge. Okay. Now, within the constellation, just below the constellation of Orion, here we see Orion embodied as Osiris. But what we need to do, we need to basically assimilate Osiris aboard the Neshmet, just like the mythology says. Now, the mythology is extremely specific, again, when it says, 1 foot on the Neshmet. You see where we're going?
Yeah.
1 foot upon the Neshmet. Now, what we've also got to do is, when this is a little bit out of context, but if we take his left or right foot, depending on the angle we're looking at it, and we actually pop it down to the brightest star, known as Deneb or Alpha Leporis, within the constellation, again, of Wenet, which we know is the top of the rabbit's head, we actually then complete what was known as the benzene ring.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the only thing. This is the only thing that I can understand why Osiris would set foot first from being Osiris in the sky to be assimilated by setting foot upon the Neshmet. So we go from Orion, his feet, we set foot, and we join the dots. Okay. And once we've joined the dots, once again, we can find that we make the complete hypothesized benzene ring or Indol's benzene ring, which would then give you, instead of the trapezium on the left-hand side, to complete the mythology in the footsteps of Osiris by setting foot upon the Neshmet and Alpha Leporis or Arneb and connecting them dots, we then create the perfect DMT molecule in the sky. But the rabbit hole, and in fact, I've just realized there's probably a pun there somewhere. The rabbit hole thus deepens because what we find, can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got Osiris in the sky. He's set foot upon the Neshmet. We've joined the dots. And within the mythology, he's assimilated upon the Neshmet to cross the Nile. Okay. Now, the second brightest star in the constellation of Lepus or Wenet in the rabbit's head is called Nile. And when we add this particular star, when we add this particular star to this particular constellation or Osiris in the sky, assimilated as Wenet or Unefa within the rabbit's head, and journey across the Nile, we then complete serotonin in the sky. Now, the functionality of serotonin is produced, like we said earlier on, via the pineal gland during the day. And what its job is to create a general feeling of well-being and joyfulness within the human experience. Now, here's where it gets really strange. Nile, or Beta Leporis, which we call it today, Nile is actually an ancient Sanskrit name, and it has a number of meanings.
Right.
The most common meaning is joyfulness and happiness.
Serotonin.
So what we're actually doing, by following the myth of Osiris, setting foot upon the Neshmet, joining the dots across the Nile, we then create the molecular structure of serotonin in the sky, whereby the names of this particular star clusters, this one in particular, Nile, is named after the functionality of the secretion within the pineal gland itself.
That's bonkers.
It blew me away. It still does.
It's strange how DMT and serotonin are so close together. You know, so closely
They're one
related.
molecular tweak away from being basically the same thing.
One
it's absolutely
molecular
outrageous.
tweak.
That's
Wow.
Absolutely
like
outrageous.
water and hydrogen peroxide, though, so you can get some
Well, the
very
crazy thing
similar,
is-
very different molecules.
It hasn't yet been confirmed, but we've also got, I mean, we touched on the hippocampus and the myth of Pegasus and Zeus earlier on, but within the hippocampus, we've actually got the proverbial tools to create DMT. Whether that biosynthesizes at times during the day in order for us to, I guess, think back and look through our mind's eye and recall things, who knows? I mean, we're only at the beginning of this extremely deep diving rabbit hole, if you know what I mean. We're at the forefront of mythology and science, and to be fair, prior to finding this particular, I believe it's a correlation, before finding it out, I didn't know serotonin looked anything like DMT. I had no idea. So it's not like I'm trying to sort of cherry pick stuff in order to kind of make it fit my hypothesis, if that makes any sense. I'm losing you. Where am I? Can you see me on your screen?
I've got your slide up still.
No, I've lost you on mine. I've got a great big white screen that just says Zoom.
Oh gosh, that doesn't sound good, does it?
No,
you're still sharing screen, Rich.
That's all right.
According to us.
I've probably got about an inch squared vision of you guys. These tiny little
see us?
pixelated
I'm
boxes
waving.
right now.
What's this on the bottom image here? You've got this like it's like a crow's foot, and it's N with three H's going around it. What's that?
Hey, bear with me. I'm trying to get up this screen. This is driving me a little. Here we go. Sorry about this. As I say,
you've zoomed in there. Yeah.
I don't even know how or why. It's hilarious. I'm frantically stabbing at all these buttons to make it work at the moment. It's hilarious.
It's going where it's same at our end. Zoom's frozen for us as well now.
Right. Okay. So I've also had people say to me, excuse me, what is going on with the Archer's bow? How come that doesn't really seem to fit into the equation, or does it fit into the equation? But what we have are nitrogen and hydrogen compounds on here, and the most simple way to express it's known as the amines part of the tryptamines. Okay,
right.
And the most simplest description of an amines molecular structure is described as ammonia, and ammonia, again, for all intents and purposes, if I can't drag this over, but should we endeavor to drag this particular amines back over to the amines where we have the nitrogen and hydrogen molecules here, you'd create pretty much 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 with regards to the bow. So they're being quite explicit with regards to what the molecular structures of this particular mythology may or may indeed not look like. If that makes any sense.
So that's representing Orion's bow. But I mean,
Absolutely.
Osiris known for being an archer? What would that be?
No.
You know, what would be the Egyptian analogy for what he's holding? Because he often holds like a flail.
He holds a crook and flail.
Yeah,
a crook and flail. But what you'll actually, I haven't got the imagery here. It's actually terrible. The crook and flail actually appear to correspond with, I believe it might be the pons of the human brainstem, which appears to cross over. Well, if you bear with me, I'll stop sharing this and I'll actually open one up to make it look a little bit more. Oh, you've just completely.
It's all right. Chill. It's fine.
Fractalized, I guess the word is there.
Yeah, it's all right. I rectified it.
Happens all the time here.
Oh my gosh, there's 33 people in the chat.
Yeah.
That's ominous.
Ominous?
I'm on there.
Apparently, yeah. 30, people make a big deal out of the number 33.
That used to be my old racing number. True story.
Cool story, bro.
That's why you
It
nearly
is.
died.
Sorry. Didn't nearly die.
Podcast, no, presentation. Here we go. I should be able to find some of these now. PowerPoint. Where are we? Just want to make this a little bit more easier to understand, if you know what I mean, with regards to.
Yeah, because, I mean, a lot of this is quite, it's visual in its nature when you're talking about symbols and chemical symbols and whatnot. It makes me wonder how these chemical symbols are derived, why
can't actually find it.
the shape that they are. And
I should know the answer.
I imagine if you went down at a microscopic level, they're not going to look like perfect hexagons and pentagons and whatnot.
No, they never do. They never do. I mean, they're relatively uniform in shape, but with regards to, I guess, a scientific description, the hexagon, pentagons, excuse me, even trapeziums and what have you. They just make it a little bit more digestible and to understand with regards to, I guess, the microbiology of the makeup of what's actually going on with the chemical compounds in the brain.
Right. Yeah, cool.
But the funny thing is, again, we've gone over the myth of Osiris, the myth of Wenet or Unefer, the Osiris assimilated with a rabbit's head, how we then find serotonin. But what happens if we decide to marry Osiris by Isis in the sky? So Isis, we know, is recognized as Sirius, and Sirius was kind of, I guess, misrepresented or identified by the ancients. It was confused with the morning star Venus, and Venus, we know today, bear with me, it's known as the light bringer, also Lucifer. No demonic or what have you, angelic connotations there, just known as the light bringer. And where are we? If we decide to add the chemical phosphorus, which is significantly related to the notion of light within the human body, what we do, can you see this, Rob? I've got a bar across the bottom.
I've got the top image, Orion, Osiris, and then the one with Orion sort of outlined in green.
Fantastic. So if we add phosphorus, to DMT, we create another rather magical constellation or molecular structure, let's say.
Wow.
We find that we have psilocybin in the sky.
So that's connecting the Orion constellation or Osiris.
That's marrying Osiris with his wife Isis. And
Fucking
Isis
hell.
was known as the brightest star in the night sky, Sirius for all intents and purposes. Was confused with Venus. It was known as phosphor for quite some time. And that's where we get phosphorus from ancient Greek. But if we add phosphorus to the chemical or the molecular structure of DMT, we create a rather magical substance, being psilocybin in the sky. And rather, even more mind-blowing, we find we have a temple in ancient Egypt which is dedicated to Isis in Philae, and the pillars rather decidedly look like mushrooms and mushroom spores.
Oh, so you can see the gills there on the red bits, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's mad, it's crazy. It still makes me laugh when I see it. But Isis herself was known as a healer, and a healer of the sick, and a goddess of a million magical incantations. Now, if you think about 21st century science and how they've kind of U-turned with psilocybin and the benefits for human brain functionality for those suffering depression and what have you, healer of the sick and magical incantations with pillars that, again, for all intents and purposes, are describing probably psilocybin mushrooms. It's sorry, I've just read my own joke that's at the bottom of this. It's certainly a sight for spore eyes. I forgot about it.
Oh God, where's the exit button?
Terrible. I know.
Just go
I
back.
don't know.
Can you just go back to that previous slide, Rich? The one with the. There we go. Look at that. That's right. So going to the chemical compound of psilocybin there on the left. So that bottom, it's like a cross that's been added on. So that cross is the chemical symbol for phosphorus, is it?
Got phosphorus there, yeah.
So by
Literally
adding them to making what you might call a chemical wedding.
Absolutely.
Alchemy
and
fans.
chemical wedding. Beautiful poetry.
You create. That's so weird.
My
It's
Chemical
so
Romance.
My
Oh,
Chemical
nice.
Romance. It's so weird, man.
And it gets weirder still.
No,
It gets weirder
give
still.
over.
Stop it now.
Go on.
So the myth of Osiris once again appears to continue. We have known in ancient Egypt, most remember just the creator deity Amun Ra. We spoke of Amun and Amun's horns and the hippocampus earlier on. But there's also another creator deity that's known as Sahu. And Sahu is known as the complete embodiment of Osiris and Lepus. Okay, so again, metaphorical nod in the right direction to what may or may not be going on with the molecular makeup of DMT, albeit Osiris or Orion in the sky. But Sahu, we find, is the hidden one. Now, we also find throughout the myth of Osiris that DMT is in fact hidden within the acacia. We also find that Sahu is also synonymous with the incorruptible soul. Now, anyone that's done DMT will know exactly where we're going with regards to what the possibilities of a hereafter, an incorruptible soul, may or may not mean to everyday people. I mean, if I hadn't had the proverbial DMT t-shirt, I would really have to take people's word for it. And it wasn't until, I wrote Spirit in the Sky in 2017. I actually didn't try DMT the first time, probably until 2, maybe 3 years later. Right. Boy, did my life change after I took that. The incorruptible soul. Wow. I was, for the best part of, 42, 43 years of my life, I was very, very adamant and stringent. After my time here is up, it was fade to black. Pile of bones, dust, nothing more. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Thank you for coming. After trying DMT, flip that coin. It's a complete 180. My mindset has changed irreversibly, let's say, irreversibly. It seems to me that the DMT realm, DMT dome, DMT breakthrough space, hyperspace, whatever you will or won't call it, seems so overly and somewhat welcoming when these entities or Terence McKenna's DMT jesters and tykes welcome you back. Like, he's here, he made it, he came back, welcome.
What do you call them, Matt? The Clockwork Clowns?
Clockwork Clowns? Yeah, I believe that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the thing is, again, clowns we find throughout ancient rock art the globe over. It doesn't matter where you are, what continent, how old, depending on, these petroglyphs are, they're basically DMT jesters. Wow. There's no two ways about it, and I go quite on a bit of a deep dive into that when I'm uncovering this throughout searching for Osiris and the Tree of Life, which was the latest publication here. But again, it seems that the methodology of all these ancient cultures and societies were indeed practicing shamanic practices with entheogenic compounds, which can only be described as a DMT breakthrough, you know.
Now, you mentioned that the acacia, the importance of the acacia. As far as, I mean, is there any existing, because when I think of DMT and shamans, I think of ayahuasca, and as far as I know, they use 2 or 3 specific plants. I mean, is there any evidence for Egyptian shamans being able to harness the acacia for DMT extraction?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We still find in abundance on the banks of the Niles today. And again, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Nicotila. Yeah, tongue-tied. But ancient Egypt and the banks of the Niles today is extremely abundant with acacia. And again, I discussed this a lot more in depth in Searching for Osiris, but I think they were utilizing more than just the acacia as well.
Right.
I think there's a very large possibility they were utilizing the common reed. And I'll give a brief overview before we get back to Sahu. But excuse me, the Osiris, when he was chopped up into a number of pieces and scattered across the land, he was missing what was known as his golden or shining phallus, which, again, I believe is an ancient axiom whereby we should keep searching for this phallus, searching for Osiris, or the deeper meaning behind it. And we find that the most common reed that's abundant the world over is known as canary reed. But the canary reed is rich in DMT. It's rich in 5-MeO DMT, and it's got extremely high potentials of extractable DMT within it. Now, we actually find that this phalaris grass or canary grass is canary grass is actually scientific name is phalaris grass. Now, we're searching for Osiris' phallus as well, so there's an etymological link there. But what we also find out is that Osiris was known to be missing his shining phallus, but the canary reed or the phallus grass is also known as the shining reed.
Wow, what a coincidence!
What another coincidence, right?
They just keep mounting up.
Absolutely. And what kind of, I guess, cemented. I mean, I'm actually writing part 4 of this particular site. I mean, if someone had told me I'd be writing a trilogy 5 years ago, again, I would have probably scoffed a little bit and thought, yeah, probably not. Time for another fictional one or whatever. But yeah, the more I seem to be looking into it, and the deeper I dive into the rabbit hole, I guess, the more I'm uncovering with regards to coincidental, really, or methodical connections that seem to be pointing an extremely accusing finger back in the direction of DMT. Sahu, as I said, it was known as the hidden one. We know that DMT is hidden within the acacia and the shining reed or the phalaris grass, respectively. We also know that the DMT experience might be likened to an incorruptible soul. But we also find that Sahu was also known as the beautiful renewal. Now, we've also, it's only probably about 6 months, maybe even 8 months ago. It's probably not even a year gone by, but we've actually connecting these dots as intended. Excuse me. We actually find out that DMT now promotes neurogenesis within the human brain. So basically, brain cells that are dying may well be renewed or indeed regenerated via endogenous DMT, hence beautiful renewal for assimilated creation deity Sahu, who again is synonymous with both Osiris and the mythology of Osiris in the sky and the constellation of Orion. So yeah, there's a lot stacking up here with regards to what the possibilities may or may not be with regards to an ancient axiom, the myth of Osiris, rather directly point an accusing finger towards DMT, what this might be human experience and what our potential might be in this life and quite possibly a hereafter, you know.
I mean, my
Again,
takeaway
aside,
is I need to get on DMT to sort of, fix my brain.
You should wait until you're 42 years old.
Well, I've not got long to wait then,
Oh,
have
there
I?
you go.
No.
Well, yeah. Why wait? I want to regrow some cells.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, with regards to the likes of dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that, with regards to quite possibly, I don't know how many years it's going to be, but I think science is rapping on the door of like DMT EpiPens for stroke victims that may or may not be needing to, I guess, not let their brain functionality shut down completely with regards to this beautiful renewal.
Well, we've all seen that video of a chap who did he have? I think he might have had Parkinson's or vascular dementia or something, and his son puts a couple of drops of CBD oil on his tongue, and it's like flicking a switch.
I cried when I saw that. It was beautiful. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And again, cannabis itself has been sort of, I guess, demonized for decades.
The war on
decades too
drugs.
long. No, it's crazy. That's your brain on drugs. Exactly. We'll remember the adverts growing up in the 80s and 90s, you know?
Yeah, just say no.
Just say no. Just say no. But then you find out that the human brain is hardwired for these chemicals. You know, the endocrine system has cannabinoids. It's got an endocannabinoid system. You know, there's missing links in the human brain where we ingest this stuff, and it creates the perfect chain. It's like holding hands in the brain, if you know what I mean. It's like, man, I can help you out here, you know. And again, why do we produce DMT endogenously in the human brain? I mean, it's the world's most psychedelic and wholly illicit drug known to man, really. Yet we produce it in the human body. What's going on? There's got to be more to the madness with regards to this demonized molecular structure and some purposes. Seems to be giving you a wider grasp of, I guess, a wider proverbial reality that might indeed exist all around us. I mean, as I say, a bust of Osiris and the photoreceptors and the cones of the human eye and the pineal gland. I think there's a lot to it. And I don't think the Egyptologists are doing themselves any favors by not so much poo-pooing it. They don't even want to entertain this stuff. No. You know, it's like they've got it under wraps. This is how it is. It's under lock and key. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense at all. It makes, in my mind, it makes more sense that these myths have been built entirely purposeful for people like ourselves today to try and understand what this is about. As I say, it's forever blown my mind and continues to do so. As I say, if someone had said to me a few years ago, I'll be writing my 4th book about this stuff, I would have laughed. But I'm not gonna I'm not gonna give the game away too much. But there's a North American mythology, excuse me, that basically mirrors the Nile Valley, and they were practicing the same shamanic practices as the Nile Valley as well. And again, for all intents and purposes, they're fundamentally talking about DMT. I mean, this image here, if you can see, it's come up on my right on your screen at all. We've got some pre-Columbian artifacts alongside kind of, I guess, famous DMT deity or jesters or clockwork clown images. But we know for a fact that these indigenous tribes, people, shaman, whatever you want to call them, from bygone days, were in fact practicing know today as Anadenanthera columbrina, which is a psychoactive variety of seed which contains bufotenine, 5-MeA, and NN-DMT. So it looks like they were actually deifying their idols. I guess, yeah, from what they were seeing in the DMT realm. And this goes all the way down, the South American coast through Bolivia and Peru.
Peru, yeah.
It again, as I say, the deeper you dig into these sort of things, the more profound it gets. We've got the Vilca seeds here. We've got the Vilca seeds on what's known as, I think it's called the Ponce monolith, but we can see that it's actually holding. Here we've got, a snuff pouch. We've got tubes for ingestion, for snorting it. You've got a deity here on the sun gate in Tiahuanaco, who again, for all intents and purposes, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've met this guy.
Rich, that down at the bottom right, next to the seeds, the far bottom right image, that looks very much like the Temple of Man, the Luxor. Is it the Luxor temple?
Bravo. Oh wow! I love that. Wow.
Have you ever?
No, that looks like R.A.
Schwalder-Lubitsch. Yeah,
that's it. That is man in motion. Wow.
But that's South America, and Luxor's in Egypt.
No,
and these civilizations never met and were never connected in any kind of way.
Well, they appear to have the same thought process, because what we've got here is known as the Southern Crux, which is one of the most, predominant constellations in the night sky in the Southern Hemisphere. And yeah, the brightest star in this particular constellation is known as Mimosa. And Mimosa is a variety of acacia. And we also find that the Southern Crux has been, I guess, iconographed. Oh, there's a word there. I'm kind of making up new words.
Iconified?
Iconographied as what's known as the Inca Chicana symbology. Now, it's central to Inca cosmology because it's basically a Quechua word, and it's Cachai translates as to cross or to bridge. Okay.
Right.
Now, the symbol is often, I'm going to just read this off the screen, but the symbol is often constructed in such a way that only half of it protrudes from architectural structures across the continent. The cross is thus completed by its shadow, created by the shadow representing the non-material world.
Wow.
So what they're actually giving us keys to with regards to an as above, so below mythology, just like the Nile Valley, and having their stars named after the molecular structure of the substances that they're ingesting to meet their deified creations. I think there's a lot more to go on here, as opposed to throwing it away saying, no, it's all just, it's all hearsay, what you're talking about. Do you know what I mean? But again,
it's primitive. That's the usual word. It's primitive. We're so much more sophisticated these days.
Unbelievably. And again, you spoke about ayahuasca within the Amazon rainforest as well, and you asked the indigenous people, the shamans, the Quechua people, and they say, well, out of the 80,000 plus sort of botanical variety throughout the Amazon, how did you come to create ayahuasca with the root of one and the leaf of another? And they just say, well, the plant.
Say again, the plants told us.
The plants told us.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And when you ingest these plants, my word, they really give you, I mean, again, I've had a couple of real psychological beatdowns on DMT, I feel a little bit brave today. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the DMT pipe and try and get this proverbial t-shirt before I write sort of book number 2. And there I was on my balcony. I've hit the pipe once, twice, 3 times. Okay, no, I'm not breaking through at the moment. okay, so I've got some Changa here. Now, Changa is basically it's basically mimosa root bark that's infused with DMT crystals. So I've actually had a pipe of Changa next to my DMT pipe as well. And yeah, like an absolute idiot, there's me saying to myself, well, the 3 hits, the 4 hits, man, what's going on? Maybe my crystals aren't up to it. I've not kept them fresh enough. I'm going to hit the Changa. So I've hit the Changa, nothing. I've hit the Changa again, nothing. I'm thinking, wow, what's going on? Am I doing something wrong? Am I burning all this away? I've hit the pipe again, and then the Changa crept up on me like, I don't know. I don't even want to try and describe it. It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I actually thought my partner was going to come home with my son and find the first person to ever overdose on DMT on the balcony.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Pixelated. I meshed into the tiles around me. I actually felt it was crazy. My brain and soul was kind of cascading backwards and free falling out of. Whilst at the same time, I had these pixelated jesters again, sort of running through my window at me, laughing, going, "Oh, you've done it now. Now we've got you. Now we've got you. You wait until you see what's on the other side." It was absolutely terrifying. I was literally clinging to the brickwork, thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
It's like
no, it was far too late. It was far too late. And again, what I saw wherever I went, it completely shattered my worldview and outlook on what reality in fact be regarding a bigger picture. I mean, we spoke about eyes and light and stuff like that, but the light that we're privy to that makes up around us only makes up for something like 0.0035% of the spectrum of light that's actually available to us. I mean, if we're getting a hundredth of a sliver of what's around us, I mean, what are we missing? You know, what else is out there? I mean, again, I've described this kind of thing before, just like with regards to the ether and the internet. We can't see this information around us, but it's there. You know, you pull your phone out, the Wi-Fi reception, crikey, any question known to man can be answered via what's going on which is kind of floating around us on a daily basis, but we can't see it. But the information's there, you know. And I think that sometimes on a DMT experience, I think we become a little bit more privy to, I guess, the proverbial bigger picture of what's out there. And again, it is as terrifying as it is. I guess walking that particular walk down the DMT breakthrough experience, as terrifying as it is, coming out and feeling, I guess, seeing the world with new eyes again, it's absolutely mind-blowing, and it's completely shattered my worldview and flipped my world upside down, just like the Fresh Prince, man.
Right, well, so boys, when are we doing it?
Well, we need to get ourselves a pipe first, don't we?
You can make one out of an apple, I've heard.
I was just thinking when you were telling that story about the guy who accidentally found LSD and cycled home, and he had like a similar experience because he took a massive dose of it, didn't he?
That's it.
And he was like completely melted by it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like Aldous Huxley describing how he got lost in the folds of his corduroy trousers. On that would have been LSD. Or what was the other one? Ketamine? No, not ketamine. Peyote?
Mescaline.
Mescaline.
Oh, mescaline. Okay. Yeah. Well, again, mescaline's derived. Am I right from the peyote?
Peyote cactus. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
And the San Pedro as well. And San Pedro is St. Peter, and St. Peter holds the keys to the gates of heaven. So
yeah. Well, bloody hell, Rich, this has been mind blowing.
Yeah.
It's been fun, and I've absolutely appreciated every minute of it. It's been great fun. Just like how kick back and relaxed you guys are. You know, it's nice to shoot the breeze and have a bit of banter as well at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's a little bit, man, this is too much. This is too much information. What's going on? But if you can break it up, a little laugh every now and again, it's always extremely welcome. So I do.
No, it's been absolutely great. I mean, the links in the show notes are for your YouTube channel and your Amazon page, author page, where people can pick the book up. Is there? Because I'm just conscious that we've gone over time. I don't want to keep you longer than we agreed.
We can wind this up and we can pencil it in again somewhere down the road. Because to be fair,
what are you doing next Sunday? I feel like we could talk for hours and hours because we've only really just touched on the actual psychedelic experience and
no, exactly,
and you know,
and I've only tiptoed around tiptoed around Spirit in the Sky as well.
Yeah,
and again, we can do a whole podcast on deities, myth, and tryptamines. Again, sounds hilarious, blowing my own trumpet, but I actually reread this on a trip going down to see my son on the South Coast recently, and I was like, dude, who wrote that? That's wow.
Clockwork Clowns.
Yeah, you know, these creative entities kind of take over when you get your mojo. Do you know what I mean? They say writer's block and stuff like that, but there's times where you start penning stuff like this and you just get lost, and then you read some of the stuff back and you're like, man, I didn't even know I knew that.
That's ace.
Well, downloading this stuff, you know.
Yeah, people talk about that, getting a download.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So no, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Ben, Matt, and Phil. It's been brilliant. So yeah, we'll talk again, liaison for sure. If you want to do this again, we'll find a time and date, and it'll be great fun.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been fantastic, Rich. We'll close up this section. And just to say thanks, Rich. Thanks for joining us. It's been fascinating. There's been loads of stuff going on in the chat. I've not even paid a single bit of attention to it because there's just been that much.
It's been fizzing.
It's been fizzing, yeah.
It's nice people have been commenting as well. So
yeah.
when you drop it, it'd be nice to see some of the comments come up in bits and pieces. And maybe if they're asking questions when you float it on YouTube.
Oh, there was a question, wasn't
questions for people on that as well. So that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
So, stay on the line for us for 1 minute, Rich, while we play ourselves out. And you lot watching live, we'll see you back in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we'll do some news. Got lots of funny stuff to do this week. You'll love it. All right. Right, fantastic. See you in a bit. Ta-ra!